Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh on this Thursday. Welcome. I'm beginning the show right at the top with Jim Geraghty of National Review. You hear him on The Editors. You hear him on Three Martini Lunch podcast. You read his Morning Jolt from National Review almost every day. I hope you do at least. But I really wanted to talk to him today because of a book he wrote a long time ago, Voting to Kill. When did you write that book, Jim?
2006, and it came out 2 months before the 2006 midterms, and it was a really good time to publish a book about how 9/11 and the threat of terrorism and Islamist terrorism were going to keep Republicans in power forever. Which, as you know, September 2006 is when they came out, and thank you for your help promoting that book and the enormous help you've been for all the books I've written since then that I will ever send to you. By the way, I should point out the book was not prescriptive, or it's not saying that, but it was right around 2006. The electorate was like, we're not worried about Al Qaeda anymore.
Well, that's it. We're not worried about Al Qaeda anymore. But you know something about Al Qaeda, and the reason I bring it up is because we've got a situation developing in Syria, and I thought I would ask you. People remember Osama bin Laden very well. They mostly might remember Zawahiri as number two, the Egyptian that was really the brains behind the organization. A few people remember Zarqawi, who went crazy in Iraq for a few years. And most people probably remember Baghdadi because of Donald Trump's press announcement that he died like a dog, right? So my question to you is, do you have a fix on Jolani in Syria? Do you? Because there was a massacre this week in Sweden. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. There was a massacre early of the Alawites. I'm beginning to wonder whether or not we haven't got another Taliban on our hands here, another ISIS.
So part of it is, Hugh, I was in Syria in March this year, right?
No, I did not know that.
Okay, apparently I'm doing a terrible job of promoting that. And yes, so at the tail end of my Ukraine trip, my buddies who I travel with, who were ecstatic to see Assad toppled, said we should go over there. And most of my friends, some friends who work in the intelligence world, defense world, folks like that, were all happy to see Assad go, but they were very wary about the guys taking over. They are HTS. BTS is the Korean guys that your grandchildren are really excited about. They're the Korean K-pop group. HTS is, let's face it, Islamist. Now, they are an offshoot of ISIS, and in fact broke away from ISIS and got into a giant rivalry with ISIS. So now they actually hate ISIS. So that's the good news. Jolani, since the takeover and the toppling of Assad back in December, had been saying a lot of the right things. He met with Trump. He had said, we have no interest in a fight with Israel. Let's also point out that what's left of the armed forces in Syria after 13 years of civil war doesn't really have any capacity to fight a war with Syria. So when people are saying, the Israeli jets were refueling over Syrian airspace and Syria did nothing about it, Syria didn't really have any options to do anything about that. Their planes were built by the Soviet Union, right? So they had no capacity to go up there and do anything to stop it. But they were basically saying, look, we're not interested in a continuing fight. We need to rebuild from a terrible, devastating civil war. We're interested in reconnecting with the West. Yes, we are devout Muslims, but we are not interested. We want to live with the Druze. We want to live with the Syrian Christian population. They were saying all the right things. Whether they were doing that was less clear on the answers. Like I said, I was there in the beginning of March. Second week of March, they had that terrible massacre in the Latakia area, which, oh, by the way, I had visited a couple days earlier, and no, that didn't freak me out at all. So I wrote on that a very, a Washington Post column, very skeptical, saying, well, it was really nice to have about 3 months of peace, and now it looks like that's over again. Things calmed down again. Trump met with them. There was, they're all, basically enormous chunks of the Syrian people are just sick and tired of war, want to rebuild the economy, want to go back to having a normal life, are perfectly happy to reconnect. You go to places like Idlib, which is kind of where the Islamists come from, where they have the it's not the flag of ISIS, but it is the al-Shahra, which is the Arabic script in black letters on white lettering. The ISIS flag was a black background and white lettering. So it's totally different, nothing to worry about. They're like my traveling buddies who are all as pallid as I am. We got some not hostile stares, but there were a lot of like, what the heck are you guys doing here? And it was definitely a sense of like, these folks want to live very traditionally, very religiously, and you could see there being problems. I think Jelani, look, HTS is a big group, and I actually spoke to a guy over there who Hugh was just the nicest guy you're ever going to talk to, who's on an international terrorist watch list and banned from traveling outside of the country and stuff, but who basically was like, look, people think we're crazy Islamists like the Taliban. We're nothing like that. When we walk into a coffee shop, we don't take things the way the old Assad people do. We stand in line and we pay just like normal citizens and stuff. So on the one hand, there is this concept of a rule of law and being good citizens at least amongst some of them. On the other hand, they're Islamists. And you kind of never know when these guys are going to get riled up and say, okay, it's time to go out and show the Druze who's boss and go kill a whole bunch of them. HTS is a very big group. There's an effort to turn HTS into a traditional Syrian army, structured, organized, not this kind of warlord roving band type. I was like, I saw while I was over there, Syria probably had had a rougher 13-year stretch than any other country on earth, and it made the rebuilding that needs to be done in Ukraine look like an HGTV project. Like, everywhere we went in Syria, there were buildings that were just demolished from all the fighting, and whole neighborhoods outside of Damascus that were just rubble and abandoned. And this was like 6-7 years ago, and nobody had ever come back there. So I would like for the United States to work with them where we can. I think there's going to be a lot of trust but verify. I think there's going to need to be a lot of baby steps. It's understandable that we're going to see things out of this government that we're not going to like, and when they do things like that, we're going. By the way, it's worth noting, Geraghty came out and said that this latest massacre or attempt of the Druze, this is unacceptable. This is not what we stand for. We're going to track down whoever did this. We're going to get them. Now, it's also what he said over the Latakia massacres.
I'm glad you said, because I listened to a podcast today by Haviv Rettig-Gur, who is interviewing an Israeli Druze, who tells me the Jelani MO is to wait for a local disturbance, in one case Alawite, most recently Druze, and then send in his killers to machete everyone and destroy basically the ethnic minority group. First the Alawites, now the Druze. But the Israelis said, not our Druze. Druze are our friends. They're Druze in Israel. We're not going to let you do it. Okay, there's my exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very optimistic, 1 being not a chance, where's Jelani land on turning out well in Jim Geraghty's mind?
Probably right around a 5. It's good that he's saying all the right things. It's good that he recognizes that look, we've all seen the crazy foreign dictators with the machetes in the air, waving and saying, we will slaughter. It's good that he's not saying that sort of thing. It's good that he wears a suit. It's good that he says he wants to engage with the West, our allies. We're lifting sanctions and trying to restore something resembling normal diplomatic relations and normal trade relations with the new Syrian regime before we did. So, look, there are some signs of positivity there. Like I said, there are plenty of Syrians who want to put all this behind them and just live in peace. Whether Jelani's the rare guy. Like, he's been a guest of our government in one of our prison camps in Iraq because he went to join Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Then he joined ISIS, and then he split off and formed his own group here. I completely understand why somebody looks at this guy and says, once an Islamist, always an Islamist. I don't believe this guy's changed. We can't trust him, and we got to look at him as another potential Mullah Omar or al-Baghdadi or something like that.
All right, Jim, you've got enough to do for the Post and the National Review, but we are now assigning you from the editor's desk that you've got to keep track of Jelani for the American audience, because you do that as a side gig for America, and you have been doing it for 20 years. Jim Geraghty, thank you. Follow him at Jim Geraghty on X.